Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight down the fascinating rabbit hole of animal cognition to answer a completely mind-bending question, one that I promise is going to forever change how you view the natural world around you.
So picture this. You're a wild crow, right? Just kind of vibing on a telephone wire. Maybe you're looking for French fries, or maybe you're just quietly judging the people walking by. Then, out of nowhere, this gigantic, weird, bipedal human reaches down and carefully removes a piece of plastic that's wrapped around your leg. Does your walnut-sized brain actually process that as help? Or, is it just random noise in the void? Do wild animals actually understand when we're trying to save them?
Section 1. The Biological Machine Myth. Animals as Machines. Now, to truly appreciate how incredible animal cognition is, we have to rewind a bit. For centuries, the dominant scientific view was actually that animals didn't feel or understand much of anything. They were basically viewed as unthinking biological machines.
And science was stuck in this mindset for a really long time, mostly thanks to something called Morgan's Canon. Formulated in the late 1800s, this rule basically dictated that, hey, if your dog looks guilty after completely destroying your couch, you absolutely cannot say it feels guilt. Instead, you have to say it just learned a mechanical response. This rule forced researchers to massively overcorrect. They embarrassingly dismissed the rich inner lives of animals for decades, because back then, it was considered totally naive to suggest an animal could read intentions or process complex social dynamics.
But wow, as the data started rolling in, that old theory was completely blown out of the water. Just look at the sheer processing power of the corvid intellect. Crows and ravens don't just use tools, they hold socially transmitted grudges. Researchers at the University of Washington actually found that crows gossip. They actively recruit other crows to dive bomb specific researchers who had worn trapping masks. But here's the flip side. They also remember kindness. People who regularly feed crows often report receiving these little shiny gifts, like buttons or pieces of glass, left exactly where the food usually goes. They're literally building reputational profiles of us.
So think about it. When a freed crow just calmly looks at you instead of immediately fleeing in panic, it's not some biological glitch. It's actually running a highly sophisticated social calculation. In a brain the size of a walnut, it's performing a rapid, intuitive cost-benefit analysis that frankly outperforms most corporate software when it comes to social sophistication. In their mental model of the world, you are suddenly capable of a mutual exchange.
Section 2. Evidence of cross-species empathy. Evidence in action. The crow example is amazing, but what happens when things get really serious? We actually have extraordinary, peer-reviewed cases of wild animals actively seeking out human assistance during moments of extreme vulnerability. Take this famous 2013 incident in Hawaii. A wild bottlenose dolphin swam directly up to a diver, held perfectly still, and then actively repositioned its body, literally rotating, so the diver could get better access to remove a fishing hook that was embedded in its fin. That is definitely not a reflex, that's an assessment, and it perfectly captures cross-species empathy, which is when pro-social helping behaviors extend beyond narrow self-interest and cross right over the species barrier. It's exactly why African wildlife rangers report seeing wild elephant herds moving carefully around injured humans, or even covering deceased humans with branches, which is the exact same mourning behavior they display for their own dead.
And we can see this cognitive complexity build even further in this deeply fascinating Japanese study on capuchin monkeys. Researchers had these highly intelligent little primates simply watch a human act either helpfully or obstructively to a complete stranger. When offered food later, the monkeys overwhelmingly refused it from the humans they had watched being mean to someone else. They were actually evaluating a human's general moral character based entirely on third-party behavior. They're literally sitting there watching you interact with a stranger and deciding what kind of person you are.
Section 3. Stress response or genuine trust. Evaluating stillness. Now, we do have to respect the scientific skepticism in the room here. What if an animal holding still during a rescue isn't trusting us at all, but is actually just totally overwhelmed by acute stress and pain?
Honestly, this is a very legitimate scientific concern. It highlights a phenomenon known as tonic immobility. Basically, when trapped, an animal's body can flood with cortisol and adrenaline, shifting them into extreme threat mode. It triggers an involuntary behavioral shutdown where the animal just freezes, completely limp, and from the outside, this ancient survival mechanism can look exactly like calm cooperation.
So, spotting the difference is absolutely crucial. Wildlife rehabilitators, the people who dedicate their entire careers to this work, they look for qualitative distinctions. For example, a raptor rehabilitator with over 15 years of experience noted that her recovering birds didn't just freeze. Their breathing changed, their muscle tone relaxed, and they would actually turn their heads specifically toward her footsteps while totally ignoring strangers. To them, she represented safety and predictability. That is genuine trust and a learned association. It's entirely distinct from simple stress paralysis.
Section 4. The humpback whale encounter, a rescue operation. To really grasp the sheer scale of this cognitive awareness, let's examine a 2011 rescue off the coast of San Francisco that pretty much stops everyone cold.
A massive humpback whale was tangled tightly in crab trap lines across its mouth and fins, completely exhausted. When the rescue team arrived, they were facing a terrifying reality. This animal weighed 50 tons. It could have ended every single diver present with a single involuntary spasm. Yet it allowed these tiny, completely vulnerable humans with specialized knives to swim right up and around it.
And despite the sheer danger and the total exhaustion, the whale held perfectly still for over an hour. An entire hour. It actively resisted the overwhelming biological urge to panic, while strangers methodically worked all around its massive body.
But here is the craziest part. When it was finally freed, instead of just disappearing into the deep ocean, the whale circled back. It approached each diver individually, nudging them gently. One diver actually noted that the whale positioned itself to make direct eye contact, with an eye the size of a grapefruit. It didn't just treat the water uniformly. It deliberately showed recognition of the specific individuals who had just caused its relief.
Section 5. The Paradox of Wildlife Rehab, Careful Management. Now, this brings us to a genuine evolutionary puzzle. Historically speaking, human proximity almost always meant predation or capture, right? The instinct to flee from us is deeply wired in. So why on earth would wild animals have any capacity to recognize helping behavior from humans?
Well, the answer lies in flexible social intelligence. Animals that live in complex groups like your dolphins, elephants, and primates, they need to continuously read intentions just to survive. That cognitive architecture is flexible by design. The exact same machinery that reads a non-threatening posture or slow movements within their own species transfers incredibly easily to reading human body language. It turns out animals understand human kindness simply because they know what kindness looks like, regardless of the biological body it's coming from.
But, and this is a big but, this leads to an absurd philosophical paradox for wildlife rehabilitators. You have to be kind without being recognizably you. See, if these animals associate humans with safety and the absence of a threat, that habituation dramatically reduces their survival odds once they go back to the wild. They become dangerously approachable. This is why serious rehab requires such deliberate management. They use barriers, they hide their faces, they even use puppets, all so the animal doesn't learn that humans equal safety.
Section 6. They are watching us. Animals draw conclusions. Ultimately, what this science proves is that goodness is legible across biological barriers. Whether that goodness is being processed in a brain the size of a walnut or a brain the size of a small watermelon inside a skull the size of a car, these creatures can genuinely feel the difference between being helped and being hurt.
And this is exactly why your actions out in the world actually matter. Every single encounter you have with a wild animal contributes to that animal's massive data set on what humans are. When you make that small, maybe inconvenient effort to move a turtle off the road or just slow your car down, it doesn't just disappear. That act echoes through social networks you cannot even see, in species whose cognition we are only just beginning to truly grasp.
So, I want to leave you with this final, somewhat provocative thought. Knowing that wild animals show such sensitivity to helping intent, and knowing that a wild crow might be running a facial recognition algorithm on you from a telephone wire at this very second, what is the crow outside your window filing away in its mental folder right now? How are you going to act during your next encounter with the natural world? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes open out there.